Oh, hi, I'm making notes. Like, because I didn't have enough notes. And class is in session. Hello, Jeff Turner, my darling. How are you?
Hello. I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. So I have a little bit different look on my sister April's birthday. God rest her soul. I decided to be as fearless as she was in life and got in the car and drove to Great Clips and told the nice young lady to take it off.
Hmm.
And so my hair is gone. It will grow back, God willing, or not. And it was interesting. Thank you, Jonathan. You are so sweet.
I agree.
It's been, I mean, my poor dog, Jeff, honest to God, talk about classes in session. I walked in this house and she's like, "Who are you?" And what have you done with my mother? It's like when the substitute teacher shows up
Yeah.
and she vaguely resembles the regular teacher, but a little suspicion, a little of skepticism, I guess. I don't know. She got over it.
It's like I texted you last night. Anytime I shave from like
Yeah.
the 12 o'clock shadow I normally sport to this, my kids are always like, "Who are you? Please go put it back on."
Well, I've been a hairy beast most of my life. I mean, I've always had big hair, like big hair. Thank you, Judy. You're so sweet. Um, and so I used to wear it short decades ago. I used to wear it short. It was just, I was so busy. It was easy to, it kind of brings me back to my youth.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Oh, sweet. That's so sweet. I love that picture. Oh, Laura's here tonight. Oh, sweet. Yeah, Peanut must have been. Yeah, she was. She was. And when I started talking to her and she came up and she started licking my cheeks like, "Oh, I never see those. You usually got long hair over them." Thank you, Amir. Thank you, honey. But it was a change and I needed a change. And one of the things that we it was like, "Hi, Greg." It was an act of defiance against the cancer.
Hmm.
You're not going to take my hair. I'll take my hair. All
Yeah.
right. And then I loaded it into a baggie. I mean, the poor woman who was, I mean, the whole time that she was cutting my hair, all she did was talk about her aunt who has stage 4 cancer and she's in hospice. And we talked about spirituality and we talked about, oh, we love Jeff too. Isn't that sweet?
Oh, thanks, Bill. Oh.
Well, yeah, but because your feelings, he did shave. He shaved.
Mhm.
And it reminded me of, the whole thing about being where you are needed at the place that you are needed when you need to be there.
Hmm.
And for 45 minutes, she stalled. I mean, she could have cut my hair faster than she did. She stalled because we were talking about life and death and the afterlife and the cyclical nature of life and how her aunt is suffering and part of her wants her to go quickly and part of her wants to stay. And I had the same exact thing happen to me 2 weeks ago with a dog in a ditch.
Hmm.
Part of me, as I held her trembling body, wanted her to quickly pass. And the other part of me wanted her to survive this trauma.
Mhm.
And, that conflict, that thing. So we're going to talk about this tonight.
Hmm.
Hi, Rose. Hi, Linny. Oh, so sweet. Linny's here. Oh, look who she's got laying on her shoulder over there with long hair.
Hmm.
So anyway, we were supposed to do this show 2 weeks ago. And we had that horrible accident in front of the house. And I had to go and be where I was needed when I was needed. But the title of the show that we were going to do 2 weeks ago, that we are now doing tonight, is Sanctuary in Suffering, Resurrection in Grace. And it has a short description. The soul is a sanctuary, a place within where we often suffer in silence, When a part of us dies from the pain, we are born again into an amazing awareness of the nature of suffering and the process of healing. So to begin again, traveling a path that leads to enlightenment and revelation. To be healed in grace is a virtual epiphany, an illuminating spiritual event, which, when acknowledged, is life and death altering. Join us for a profound conversation. And I want to touch on a couple of things tonight. I'm going to let you take the reins in just a minute because I know you've got 2 weeks of thoughts all ready. But one of the things that I think is most important for us to touch on is empathy. And we do almost every week. We talk about the importance of empathy. But I came across a quotation just the other day that really affected me. And I know that I had read it some time before, but I couldn't remember where and I couldn't remember when. But it just came back into my consciousness and it was sent to me by someone. I don't even remember who sent it to me. I just knew in that moment that I was receiving something that I needed to revisit and then share in Soul School tonight. It's by Hannah Arendt, Arendt. The death of human empathy is one of the earliest and most telling signs of a culture about to fall into barbarism. I think it's very important that we ingest that and we start to really think about that, because how many times have you heard me say, no matter how angry I get about whatever the situation is, societally, globally, whatever, I never let myself cross that line, because then I become what I loathe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to talk about that. So make notes, okay? And I want to talk about divine co-creation. And I want to talk about the word encyclical, okay? And the meaning of the word encyclical. It's not just papal. It has an origin. It has an etymology that is in the Greek, and it's very important. So we'll touch on that sometime during this hour. Okay, so that's basically the syllabus. So you take over from here.
Okay. Yeah, somebody's yelling in the background. Okay.
You could have dogs barking at any moment.
Yeah, same here. Dogs barking, cats meowing, God knows what else.
People know what to expect when they tune into this show, yeah. Jeff.
You never know.
That's right.
I want to chime in with everybody else and also say your hair does look great. I think it looks amazing. And, I found this, like, as silly as it might seem, sometimes when I make new spiritual commitments in my life, I'll just shave my face, and it might seem silly to somebody, but it's a way of marking a change, and just kind of marking it out and being like, okay, I'm just in some small way solidifying that, in the same way that like an act of like taking a shower can have like a very real cleansing and sanctifying effect that can coincide with
almost like baptism sometimes.
Absolutely, which is probably evolutionarily speaking where that even comes from. But the act of shaving and that's a spiritual act a lot of times. And when you said you did it in defiance of the cancer, like that's a powerful act. And that's just a powerful act. So it looks great as well. So powerful spiritual act, and it looks great. So there's a lot to kind of tackle in this syllabus. But I guess I would start with empathy. I would start with the concept of empathy, because I think that was the first point you laid down as well.
And the last time we talked about it, we talked about the fact that people seem to be avoiding it because it hurts.
Yeah.
When you care too much about the babies that are dying in Sudan because they don't have paste to eat because it's sitting rotting on a dock.
Yeah.
That's upsetting, and it should be. And if you don't allow yourself to feel it, and you don't allow yourself to feel the anger, and you don't allow yourself to speak up about it, then silence is tacit approval.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
And so I am defiant about a lot of things. In a way, Cancer has given me a higher level of courage. It has. I mean, I gathered up all my fallen locks off the floor and put them in a bag to take them to Michigan, because I'm going to be hanging out in a month with, practitioners and people that practice Reiki, and Deb DeRoos and our whole crew is going to be at Houghton Lake the last weekend in April for some serious mystical awakening and healing practices. And I'm bringing my hair.
Yeah.
Because it's got my genetic code, because it's got part of who I am in it. And, Deb, who's already been through what I'm going through, couldn't possibly have more empathy than she expresses to me. And it is something that I think, if we allow ourselves to feel it, yes, exposes us to pain, but that suffering in itself can be cleansing and healing, and bring us to a point of grace. So anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. It's just gush. It just came right out.
There's no interruption with you. This is all one conversation. It's all.
It is.
I am gonna try, if my schedule allows. I really, really deeply want to be there the end of April. I have kind of a crazy schedule at the moment that it's hard to predict what's going to happen when. So I'm not sure, but obviously you haven't been this close physically in a long time. So I'm going to try my hardest to be there. But as you're saying, so Deb, and I don't know, I guess I don't know the story, but she's experienced cancer as well. Is that what you're saying? Okay. So that is where empathy really comes from. I mean, we have mirror neurons, right? Our brains have these things called mirror neurons. And when we experience something similar to what someone else experiences, or identical to what someone else experiences, it's almost like these mirror neurons are activated. And when we witness, so let's say you go through cancer, or you go through a divorce, or you go through just any number of things, right? It can range from the extreme to the banal, but experiences, right? Then when you look at someone else who's going through the same thing, your brain feels it as though it's you going through it, right? Your brain feels it. Your mind experiences it as though it is you yourself experiencing it all over again, because you've had the experience. And now we're not all in that place where we haven't experienced everything. We've not all experienced all of the suffering. So to really be able to truly put ourselves in everyone's shoes is near impossible. But that's also why it's powerful to have some kind of icon, whether it's a saint or a deity or something. For me, it's Christ, because Christ is the archetypal suffering figure, who the suffering servant, who suffers all of humanity's suffering in one lifetime, one experience. Really, it's all kind of compacted into one experience, and you can venerate that figure, and in so doing kind of embody and take on yourself that these qualities that you might not necessarily have in yourself. And it allows you then to have the experience of your mirror neurons activated as though you've experienced another's suffering, and you gain empathy. But we very rarely take the time to do that. And I think a lot of times, we have our own pain, and we are hurting ourselves. And sometimes when we're hurting deeply, the best thing we can do for a season is to really kind of narrow our range of focus. And instead of looking at everything, look at just a few things, so that we can personally heal. But then we oftentimes get stuck there, right? And then we become very navel gazing and self-centered, and there's a time for that. There is a time for self-centeredness. It is how one gets centered, right? There is a time for it. That's not always a negative concept to be self-centered.
It's just like becoming more grounded by tilling the earth and planting a garden.
Right.
That is a meditative, therapeutic activity that is co-creative.
Right.
You are actually working with the earth itself to bring life forth in the form of plants and vegetables and fruits and pretty flowers. And, it is co-creative.
Yes, and you have to heal. You have to have your own heart healed. You have to center around yourself sometimes for a season. That's why Christ says, "Love your neighbor as you love yourself." If you don't love yourself, you really can't love your neighbor. You have to be able to have. You have to be able to give. You have to have love to be able to give love. So you have to love yourself before you can really love. So it's okay to be in a season like that, but you eventually kind of have to come out of the cave, or else that's where it becomes the Dead Sea that only receives but never gives, and so it's dead. No life can thrive there. And so I think sometimes we get so caught up in our own pain, we never leave, and it becomes easy to, like, in times like we're living in right now. I have to be honest, sometimes I don't the last thing in the world I want to do is look at the headlines. I just, because sometimes there's just so much noise and there's so much going on, and there is more that happens. Like a week's news cycle is like a year's news cycle in the past.
It is. It is.
It's overwhelming. So
it's deliberately so.
Absolutely.
So that people will shut down.
Absolutely.
So that people will just tune it out because they can't take not 1 minute more of it. It's all deliberate.
And then then we don't leave the cave. We're only centered on ourselves. And then we're not a community. And then we begin to lack empathy. Right? We lose that sense of neighborliness.
People become the others instead of the neighbors. Yeah.
And that's where it happens. And that's when it's so easy for people to turn on one another. All somebody has to do is snap their fingers, flip a switch, throw a title on someone and say, sick 'em, and we will, when we're all disconnected. Right? But like when we are in community, when we're looking at one another in the face, that is where empathy really comes from, because I'm able to experience the suffering and the emotions of another person by looking in their face, even if it's just over a computer. It's still the same thing. That was Emmanuel Levinas's whole concept, that the face is the face of the other is the face of God. And it's very easy to imagine that over yonder mountain range or over yonder river lies this tribe of savages that are completely unlike us. Their music is different, their language is different, their culture is different, their customs are different, their religion, their gods are different. They're savages. We are not, they are, whereas they look at us the exact same way, but we've never looked one another in the face. And so it's very easy to otherize. They're others, they're over there. But once we cross that river, once we cross that mountain range, and once we stare at one another, we have this profound exchange. Oh, we're one thing. We're one species having the same experience, yes, in different contexts, but we are one thing. And once we have that experience, we can never look at them as others again. But that's where empathy comes from. Empathy dies when we are separated, when we're separated by politics, when we're separated by religion, when we're separated by ideology. And people throw, like I said, they paint with these broad strokes, create these boxes and these bins, and they write titles on them. And they say anything that's in this bin has these character qualities. And then they just scoop up whole swaths of humanity and throw them in that box that bears that label. And they say, since you're in that box that bears that label, you are this kind of person, therefore you are other, therefore I can do this, that, or the other to you. And we don't see the person anymore. We see the bin we've thrown them in. We see the category that we have we've tossed them in. And in the book of the Revelation, the title
I was just looking. I'm reading your mind. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, the title that's given to the Satan figure in the book of Revelation is the accuser of the brethren, right? The accuser of our siblings, let's say, the one who accuses those to whom we are related. And the word accuser in Greek is kategoros, which sounds like what? Categorize, categories. So the satanic impulse is to categorize, right? And to put things into, it's this, it's that, it's the other. And so I don't see the complexities of all that you are as a person. I don't see the complexities of all that you are as a man living in America, as a woman living in America, as this, that. I don't see that. I just see the category that you've been thrown into by this political ideology, that religious ideology, or whatever. and then I can otherize, then I can hurt, then I can harm, whether with fists or with my words. And yeah, that is the death of empathy. We break out of these boxes by being deliberate about community. We break out of these boxes by being deliberate about looking one another in the face, literally or symbolically. I don't have to literally do it, but I can sit. And I think this is one of the things that's so powerful about prayer. People talk about, oh, prayer doesn't actually work. They cite the great prayer experiment where, different peoples were prayed for and others weren't, and the people who weren't prayed for actually technically recovered better than those who didn't. It's like, okay, all of that's fine and dandy and whatever, and it makes a great illustration for a Richard Dawkins speech. But prayer is powerful for this reason. Well, it's powerful for many reasons, but one of the reasons prayer is so powerful is that it forces the prayer, the one doing the praying, to, for however long they're praying, to focus on something other than themselves, to focus on another person, and to really deeply try to feel what another person is feeling. And however it is you pray, if you're actually beseeching a deity to help this person, or whether it's more just kind of a meditative sending good intentions their way, whatever, there's multiple ways of doing it. But even so, I'm taking myself out of myself for a moment, and I am forcing myself to feel what someone else feels, or at least what I imagine they feel. And how often do we do that in the normal course of life? But that's another way of looking in the face, even if I'm not able to physically do it. And that will cause a hell of a lot of empathy to grow very fast. That's one of the reasons that prayer is so powerful. If someone can find no other reason to pray, do it, because it's one of the quickest ways to become a person of compassion and empathy. Because, I'm spending time intentionally thinking about someone's pain, thinking about someone's suffering and sorrow, and wishing them the best, and calling on the highest and the best, as I conceptualize it, to send the highest and best to them. And that changes the heart.
And to intervene on their behalf.
Yes. But we don't pray for people. We tend to prey on people most of the time. And that's why.
Spinoza said it's man's desire.
Mm-hmm.
That all of humanity comes down to that one thing.
Yeah.
And I believe that the eyes are the window to the soul, and that when you look into someone's face and you connect with their eyes, that there is a cosmic connection that comes to the surface. Wait, what do we got here? The great gift of human beings is that we have the power of empathy. We can all sense a mysterious connection to each other. Yes, she's a very wise woman, not just a phenomenal actress. And I think that you're absolutely right, that it is that part of us, whether it's meditation or it's prayer, all part of it. Oh, Sam, hi, sweetheart, come here. So cute. A part of us that we almost relinquish, on Christmas morning when you're giving gifts to your children, the joy. Oh, there's your kitty. There's a pretty baby.
This is Binks.
Binks.
She blends in with my shirt, so you can only see her eyes.
It's beautiful. I have a white dog that sticks out like a sore thumb. I don't know where he went. Oh, there he is. That connection, that eternal connection. The eyes, I think of, you can talk about body language. You can talk about, connecting with people in a variety of different ways, like we are here, or in person or over the phone, but when you are face to face with someone and you gaze into their eyes, if you really look, you will see the universe.
Yeah.
And when you get that, it's so easy to give of yourself. I also have to say about prayer, prayer is meaningless unless there is belief behind the process.
Yeah.
The faith, it's in my opinion, the faith and the belief, which is the jet fuel that like nitroglycerin just pops in us, that part of us, that depth of emotion, and just causes it to erupt in us. And it's that process that is the revelation. I was reading recently about Robert Frost and all the tragedy that he went through in his life, the losses that he sustained in his life. You know, anybody that's interested in Robert Frost, please go to Literary Hub and read what they've compiled about his life and his journey as a poet, as an author. He wrote as an expression of his suffering and his grief and his pain. And yet there was an optimism that he retained lifelong, an optimism about life in spite of everything that he went through. I think and I hope that he died in peace because of all that he left in the world. But the reason that he left what he did was because it was the outpouring of his suffering on paper, in words, that saved him from being drawn into the depths of despair.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. The transference of emotion into the written word onto a page, and how it actually then becomes an extension of the writer, right? That I was thinking as you were talking as well, how I remember, I can't recall where I saw it, but it was a documentary. I mean, probably a decade and some change ago now, but where it was about consciousness and the way that we sort of tend to project our consciousness into objects, or how we can. And it's a famous experiment done where, man, how was it even totally done? I don't remember, but there's like a rubber hand that is set in front of a person. And then their actual hand is like under a table, or it's hidden. But they're looking at the rubber hand as though it's theirs, kind of. It's set up as though it's theirs, but their actual hand is over here. And the person conducting the experiment is like something like, let's say, rubbing a feather on the rubber hand and their hand at the same time. So they're feeling the sensation in their actual hand, and they're watching it. They're watching the source of the sensation doing the same thing on the rubber hand. And they keep doing this for a while. There's a lot more to it, and I'm forgetting many important details, I'm sure. But the point is that after a while, the person actually begins to project kind of consciousness into the rubber hand that isn't the actual hand. And so the actual thing that's doing the feeling is the actual hand that's hidden from their sight, but they're looking at the rubber hand as though it's their own. And then they start to just, they're not anymore doing anything to the physical hand. They're only doing it to the rubber hand. And yet the person is still feeling the same sensations that they were feeling when they were actually, let's say, tickling or rubbing a feather on their physical hand. When they stop doing it to the physical hand and are only doing it to the rubber hand, they don't know they've stopped doing it. They're still feeling it. Mm-hmm. And then at one point in the experiment, they like take a hammer and they smash the rubber hand with it. And the person like feels it like it's real, because at that point they've so projected consciousness and emotion and feeling into this object that's not actually connected to them, that they're feeling it as though it is an extension of them. And that's something that humans are very good at doing. And if it works with rubber hands, it certainly works with other people, right? Where I feel your pain as though it's my pain, right? I see you, I see whomever. And to be perfectly honest with you, the hardest people to do it with are the people that we really dislike. And that's also the people who it's most important we practice with. Yeah. Because that's where real transformation happens. That's, why we're told, don't just love your neighbor, love your enemies. That's revolutionary to love your enemy, and it's difficult. And we think that that's anti-revolutionary, because we think revolution is the hatred of enemies. But the most revolutionary thing you can do is to voluntarily put your heart in a place where it can be transformed. And there's no better way to do that than to learn to love your enemy. And so literally to think of those that you are most at odds with, to literally try to imagine, and I don't like doing this, but I've done it over the years because it's a powerful practice, to be like, what has made this person be this way? And what would it take for me to be that way? And if I say to myself, it's impossible, I could never be in a situation where I could be that way, I think I'm deluded, because life can happen to us in a variety of ways that could change us in ways that we're not really conscious of. And so to actually take the time to even think on that, when you can develop empathy, even for your enemy, you are one of the most powerful forces in the cosmos at that point. You really are. Once you, like Christ on the cross, looks out at those who put you there and says, Father, forgive them. They don't know why they're doing what they're doing. But he did.
Know not what they do.
And that's the powerful thing. He's like, they don't know why they're doing what they're doing. This is one of the first references in literature, so far as I'm aware, of the operation of the unconscious mind, that they are unaware of why they are doing the things that they are doing. But the inference is, but we are, Father. We know what motivates their actions, even though they don't. And so because Christ had somehow put himself in a position where he could understand even his murderers, he was able to say in that moment, Father, forgive them. And we're meant to believe, in the Christian mythos anyways, that forgiveness is what ultimately saves the cosmos. So when you're at the point where you can empathize even with an enemy, you are the most powerful force in the cosmos. You are at that point a true manifestation of the divine. And believe me, I'm not saying any one of us is going to wake up tomorrow as that. But as sons and daughters of the divine, I do believe we are already that, whether we're walking it out and manifesting it or not.
One of my favorite authors, Voltaire, one of my favorite quotations, and so apropos, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities.
Yeah.
That, if there was ever a warning, a forewarning, a clarion call to make that leap of faith. And, I try. I really do. I mean, I really do. I have people in my life who I am utterly juxtaposed to, philosophically, spiritually, morally, in every conceivable way.
Yeah.
And yet find a way to at least be polite.
Yeah.
And I don't want to know how they got where they are, why they think the way they do, why they absolve certain people of everything, no matter what. No matter what. No matter what. I have too much of a sense of justice and accountability to cross that bridge. And I hope that I get there, Jeff. I hope that I get there, because, if any one of these people that I am even in silent conflict with were to be injured or to have a trauma that they needed help, if I know them, I need to be there to help them. It's like when the hurricanes come in, and the same people that glare at each other as they pass on the streets are the same ones that are the first ones that are there to help their neighbor in distress. And nobody says, I don't like people your color. Nobody says, who did you vote for? If it's not my guy, you're on your own. You don't hear that. You don't hear it. Well, I think that we need to start thinking in terms of we're having, like a natural disaster, our reactions to each other in a natural disaster. We are living in the midst of an unnatural disaster. And I think that if we start to focus that way, we can find sanctuary. We can find grace in the suffering, because we're not the only ones that are suffering.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I think I will say for me, that was one of the things that was hardest for me to grasp is that, excuse me, I've got allergies this time of year, so I keep muting.
Okay too, honey. I got my tissues ready. I'm good to go.
I keep muting the mic and hacking off the top. But when I'm
I
talking,
never get to the mute button fast enough when it hits me. You just have to put up with it.
When I'm talking, I can't mute it. So pardon me. But the notion that I don't even like to refer to people as my enemies, but people understand what I'm talking about when I say that. People with whom I have stark disagreements over this, that, or the other. But to know that, as you said, everyone is suffering. The person who I am most tempted to ignite my torch and find my pitchfork and run off the cliff, that person truly has suffering of their own. And that is the hardest. I'm saying for me, this might not be true for everybody, but for me, that is the hardest suffering for me to locate. Because when I see someone who is causing others suffering, it's hard for me to give a damn about their suffering.
Yes.
Yet somehow they were brutalized by the brutality of reality, and as it is sometimes, and they were made brutal by the brutality of life, and it put them in a place. Now, I might not try to understand them for the purpose of redeeming them. I mean, that would honestly be great. I do think I don't want to say anybody's too far gone, but there is a certain.
Oh yeah. No, there are people that are too far gone, and there are.
Yeah, no, I agree. But there is a certain point at which I can't really do much for them. And at that point, my empathy for them is really more for me than it is for them. But even so, by understanding how monsters become monsters, at the very least, I can keep myself from becoming one, and I can help shine a light in a dark place to try to help others from doing the same. I think it's what Nietzsche meant when he says, beware, you who fight monsters, lest in the process of fighting them, you become one yourself,
Yeah.
And so anyways, it's a powerful exercise, and it's not an easy one. It's literally, I mean, I come by empathy quite naturally when it comes to, the downtrodden and the outcast and people like that. My heart just naturally goes out to individuals like that. When I was a pastor, I was always reaching for like the outcast types. You know what I mean? That's who my heart is really for.
I rescue every animal that comes down the pike.
Yeah, well, that's the cat I just picked up. That's a rescue. Everything. I'm with you.
I've never, ever, ever had an animal in my life that I didn't save from a fate worse than death.
Yeah. I had 2 years ago now, I think I had something like 10 cats. It nearly drove me insane, I will tell you that. However, they were all just rescues because I'm like, what am I going to do with these guys? And thankfully we found places for them all, but they did nearly drive me mad, but whatever. But it's still, in the name, I did it all for love, right? Did it all for compassion.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I'm the same way. It's like you see to see it and to suppress it, to suppress the desire and the urge to reach out and to help and to save, that is dangerous.
Yes.
That is
I would even qualify that as evil.
I think so.
Feel it and suppress it.
Yeah, and I think
turn your back
absolutely
on someone who needs your assistance.
I was thinking about this the other day, like Jesus talks about the unforgivable sin being blaspheming the Holy Spirit. And growing up, that was, something people freaked out about. They were like, oh, have I committed the unpardonable sin? And, we would always just try to comfort people by saying, if you're worried you didn't do it,
Yeah.
And I don't think that's really meant to be taken literally. I think it's more like a tool, because the Holy Spirit in Scripture is the agent of change and transformation. So the Holy Spirit is the thing that the Holy Spirit is, the Holy Spirit is understood to be a person, but it's also the principle of change and transformation. So, but if you blaspheme, that is, if you cut yourself off to that influence, let's say, there's no redemption from that. There's
hedonism.
Exactly. Basically. You've kinked the hose,
right?
And it can't flow to you. And so it isn't that you can commit a sin that God refuses to forgive. It's symbolic for the fact that if you cut yourself off from the source of transformation, you will cease to be transformed, and therefore there is no returning from that. And so if you see suffering, if you see someone experiencing a great pain, great tragedy, something, and you willfully turn a blind eye to it and say no, and I'm not saying, like, you have nothing you can do in that moment. You can, but I mean, if you just coldly and callously turn, that I think is tantamount to blaspheming the Spirit, because in that moment I've cut myself off from love, which is the Holy Spirit or the source of transformation.
Mhm.
And if I cut myself off from that source,
Mhm.
there's no real returning from that. I
Right.
cease to be open to the possibility of being transformed.
All right. And now we're going to go to here we go. No, that's not it. Here it is. Okay. Because what you just said is feeds directly into this in the word encyclical. Now, there are among us, you know how I always say you cannot have a crisis of conscience if you don't have a conscience?
Yeah.
There are people that just don't have a conscience. That
True.
like nothing means anything to them. It's all for me. The rest of you bastards are on your own.
Yeah.
Okay. There's plenty of them in the world, but it's the ones that are amoral, that have some foundation of what is good and right in the world, and then opts out of that, which I consider to be amoral. Ooh, I just got an invitation from a Hollywood producer. I'll tell you later. We'll talk later. We'll talk over the weekend.
Remember me, Andrea. Remember me.
I never forget.
Kidding.
Never forget. I got to get better first. They need to just fuck
Yeah.
off and leave me alone until I'm ready.
Absolutely.
Okay, but an encyclical, originally meaning a circular letter, is now primarily associated with papal letters, specifically those addressed to bishops of the church, or sometimes to all people of goodwill, intended to guide them in their ministry and address issues of faith and morals. And the etymology I told you comes from the Greek, meaning circular or in a circle, which is the archetype. It is the universal archetype. In the modern context, however, it refers to a formal letter from the Pope to the bishops of the church. But it's also, it factors into serving several purposes. It is, it's to help people address issues of faith and moral failings, to offer moral theological guidance, and to inform right reason and help discern the course of society. That is very important. In the same way that Adam and Eve went out the front gate and came back in the back gate into the Garden of Eden because the transformation had occurred. It is a process, I think, that we all go through.
Yeah.
Where we revisit and revisit and revisit. I mean, the whole notion of putting a ring on the finger of the one that you love is not to claim them, but to remind them that they are bound together in that circle of love.
Yeah.
And connected, completely connected in that way. And so I forgot the other point that I was going to make. So rescue me, bail me out, because you always read my mind.
Well, I mean, anytime we talk about circles, it just gets me going. My favorite quote, and I think it's one that I made up, so not to toot my own horn, is that the only path forward is to move in sacred circles. And we think to move in a circle is to just endlessly repeat the same thing. But that's because we're looking at it the way that flatlanders look at things. We just think we're doing this. But if you kind of tilt and zoom out, you see it's a spiral. And you're making that same motion, but you're going up. And that's what spiral dynamics is all about. Go ahead.
Think of the, what's the little gerbils that get in the wheels?
Yeah.
And they run and they run and they run and they run. And it's kind of like a Sisyphean task.
Yeah.
Well, really, they're getting exercise, but
they
enjoy it and it's fun for them.
Yeah.
They at least appear to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And, and it made me think about, Sisyphus rolling the stone up the mountain and then watching it go down the end, then going back down and rolling it up the mountain. The
Yeah.
Sisyphean tasks of life
Yeah.
can actually provide us with sanctuary, can actually be a place where
Yeah.
when I'm doing dishes, I'm also soul searching. I'm also conjuring
Absolutely.
memories that come out of nowhere from 40, 50, 60 years ago. Suddenly, I'll think of something, revisit that in my mind, reconcile it, and then say, okay, I don't want to think about that anymore. Moving on to the future, projecting into the future, or just enjoying the warm, soapy water on my hands.
Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing, is that we might start off with the aim of accomplishing something great. We get tired of doing it at some point, and then we reach a threshold, and then we begin to enjoy it, and we're no longer trying to get anywhere. That we initially kind of start loathing the task because we don't feel like we're getting to where we wanted to get to. But then it's at that point where we're just enjoying being there in the moment, that's when the actual transformation begins, and we are actually moving forward. But then we're just so absorbed in the task, and we're so in love with the task, that we forget we're even moving forward. And that's the sacred circles thing. It's like if someone's moving up a spiral staircase, if you look from an aerial view and it's perfectly aligned, all you're going to see is a figure moving in circles.
Spiral.
That's it. But
That's
so to
all
you, because it's perfectly aligned, it just looks like someone doing the same thing over and over and over again. And so there is that notion, Camus, we must imagine Sisyphus happy, otherwise, what's the point? It's either it's suicide, right? Isn't that Camus, right? That's the greatest philosophical question anyone could ask themselves. He says, is why don't just end it all? And so
what's the meaning of this?
Right. And so he concludes with, we have to imagine Sisyphus is happy somehow, and so we can be happy, just be content in the Sisyphean tasks of life. But the beautiful thing is that the moment you just simply accept the task as beautiful because it's the task, that's when transformation occurs. And that's when you move from this aerial view of the spiral staircase to this view, and you realize, oh, I started here, but I'm actually now here. That's where Karate Kid, right? Wax on, wax off. He thinks he's just waxing a car, and it's this, I'm supposed to be learning karate, and he hates it. Like, this is not what I'm training for. But then he just begins to like doing what he's doing. But then when he's in the ring, he's like, oh, this is what I was training for this whole time. I wasn't just moving in circles. I was actually moving up a spiral. And that's the power of the circle. So whenever you feel like I'm just endless circles over and over,
my wheels, not getting anything accomplished. Yeah.
Remember, it's because of how you're looking at things. We've all seen that picture of perspective where it's like, it's a circle, but then you move out and it's a cylinder, right? And so that's that too. You feel like you're going in a circle, you twist it like this, you realize you've actually made a lot of progress. You think I'm just waxing a car, but I'm actually learning the very things that I thought I was not learning when I was forced to wax the car. That's the power of just, anyways, I think we're
I know. He just told me, he's so, I just don't even, when he writes to me, LOL, that facial expression when you see the time left. I know. What? No, like, I have a set of nesting dolls, and every now and then I'll open up the nesting doll, the big one, and I'll open it and I'll remove the second one. And then I'll open that one and I'll remove the third. And then I'll open the last one and the little tiny one is in there. And I put them all out and I look at them together and they're beautiful. They're hand painted, wooden, beautiful, beautiful nesting dolls. And they look like a family. And I think inside each and every one of us, there is a family. There's different elements that exist within us that maybe not all need healing, but some do. And I think that it is in this encyclical, this notion of being a part of, being part of the divine, being a co-creator in our reality and what we perceive and how we interact, that is so profound, so important. I asked Bill in the chat if he would put up the event that's coming up this April, and he loaded that. Isn't that pretty picture of all the girls?
Yeah.
Yeah. So don't be intimidated that there's no men on the poster, Jeff. We need good men. So yeah, anybody that wants to join us, everybody that needs to be at this event will find their way to this event. I have all the faith in the world that that's going to happen. And that everybody that's there is there with purpose and reason for a period of cleansing and healing and divine co-creation. And so River's coming. So we have people coming in from all over the country, Jeff. Even if you just come in and spend one day.
If I'm in the state, I'll be there.
Okay. I just want to get my arms around you again. It's been too long, my star brother.
Same.
It has. So I guess class is dismissed. Oh my God. Did we burn through that hour?
We did. We were just hitting it too, man.
We were. So we'll pick up where we left off again next week. Okay.
Absolutely. Yes.
I love you with all my heart. And for all of you that are joining us tonight, if you want, stay with me for a world awakening. That comes up next. But if you have to go in peace, be the light, be a beacon of hope for the world, and be the change you wish to see in the world. Love you all. Good night, everyone.